Hey, welcome back to a new installment of the Wide Ride Podcast. Manny Navarro here. It is Tuesday, August 20th, right around 1:30 p.m. We've got Kevin Brockway, Gators beat writer from the Gainesville Sun, on with us. And Kevin, you and I are going to see each other in person pretty soon. This game is finally around the corner. The last time we had you on the podcast, we were months out. Welcome back to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on.
Manny, it's great to be on, and yeah, it's going to be a fascinating game on August 31st at the Swamp. I don't think they've announced the sellout yet, but I would assume it will be. But it's going to be quite exciting.
We are all going to be very, very sweaty and nasty, Kevin, because of how the temperatures and just the humidity of what it's going to be like. It will definitely be swamp-like for us both. Curious when we had you on in the springtime. I don't know if it was like Mayish or April when you and I caught up. We had some opinions on both of the teams that we cover. What's been the biggest change for you and how you feel about this Gators team from that springtime till now? Getting a chance to see camp. Is there anything that you think you've changed your opinion on, whether it's offense, defense, coaching? What would you say has kind of changed or evolved over time?
Well, one change is I think the change in analysts, allowing analysts to coach on the field, could help Florida in regards to special teams, which was a huge problem area last year in terms of getting guys on and off the field. Now that they have, Chris Couch and Joe Houston, who they added from the New England Patriots, on the field coaching, you could see perhaps a little crisper operation there. That's something that's a little interesting. And just as overall assessment, I think, I think the camp kind of reaffirmed that it's Graham Mertz's team. DJ Lagway has kind of struggled a bit in fall camp, in terms of throwing some interceptions here and there. So while I think that there still could be a role for DJ Lagway, I think this is, Graham Mertz comes in as the quarterback based on his experience and his knowledge of the offense and the fact that, he is certainly more advanced and more prepared to take on a major conference schedule than DJ Lagway right now as a freshman, who I think as far as throwing the ball is concerned, and learning the offense maybe is going through a little more growing pains. But I do believe there could be a role for DJ Lagway again in terms of as a wildcat guy or as a guy maybe in some short yardage situations.
What I remember talking to you now, it was just after the spring game when you and I caught up, and they hadn't added Elijah Badger or Jason Zandamela, the offensive lineman from USC, or even Cormani McClain to the roster at that time. First of all, let's talk about Cormani McLean and what is the scenario there? What was sort of the fallout? Is he still on the roster? I still have people asking me today, is Cormani McLean still playing for the Gators?
I mean, he's still on the roster, but this year is going to be a developmental year for him. I don't expect you're probably not going to see him on the field. I think this is going to be a year for him to get right physically and mentally. I think, the prevailing thought is 165-pound corner coming into the SEC. That's going to be pretty hard. You've got Jason Marshall there. You've got Devin Moore, who they're very high on, a 6'3", kind of rangy corner who had an interception last year against Tennessee. So I think there are people ahead of Cormani right now in the depth chart, and he's either going to have to accept that or, then, maybe, who knows as the season unfolds. But, whether he is on the game plan with this, everything that I'm hearing is that this is going to be a year for him to kind of almost like a redshirt year where he's going to have to kind of sit, kind of learn, practice, work while he waits and see what's happened. So, I mean, Jakeem Jackson is a guy from Kissimmee, another promising young cornerback who had an interception in a recent scrimmage too. So he's going to be in the mix. Dijon Johnson, the sophomore from Wharton High in Tampa, who decommitted from Ohio State last year this summer. I think those are all guys ahead of Cormani right now in the depth chart. So he's going to have to wait it out, and if he doesn't, then maybe he'll find a new address. But we'll see how he handles that.
Can't imagine he's got many places left to go at this point. Once you transfer once or twice, you kind of just end up hanging out there for a while. All right. Well, what about Elijah Badger? Because that was a big pickup for the Gators. Obviously, they like their receiver room a lot. Some of the word I've been getting on Badger is he's really talented. Led Arizona State last year with 65 catches. But I don't know how quickly he's sort of adapting to the playbook over there. You got Chimere DK from Wisconsin, obviously has some chemistry with Graham Mertz from their times at Wisconsin. But how's Badger sort of changed the receiver room, or do you think it's still pretty much Trey Wilson and DK that are going to be the guys?
Yeah, I think DK had the advantage of just coming in the spring and his relationship with Graham Mertz, and they like his speed too. I mean, he ran a 10.800. So I think that in terms of like his ability to get open, I think that's something that has impressed them. When we've watched Badger in fall camp, he's had moments where he's flashed pretty well. I think he does have ability, and he is a little bit of a bigger target at 6'2". But at the same time, I think he's a little bit behind in terms of picking up the playbook and doing those kind of things. So I do think that DK probably has a slight edge as the third receiver over Badger going into the season, but that can change, and I think they are going to use multiple receivers. Aiden Mizell, sophomore, has had a very good camp. I think he'll be in the mix, maybe in kickoff returns as well. Tank Hawkins, a freshman, has done really well, and TJ Abrams, the two freshmen, have done really well. Andy Jean, a kid from Miami, was a guy that had a lot of promise last year, but he's been kind of banged up and he's had hamstring issues on and off. So I don't know how much you're going to see of him. But I think they feel pretty good overall about the depth of the receiver room and some guys they have there. Marcus Burke, another guy who's an older guy, junior, who's had a good camp as well, a bigger target, and is finally starting to figure things out. He probably had a little bit of maybe some attitude issues, had a hard time, transitioning with the new coaching staff. But he has his head on straight now and has shown some ability as well. So I think they feel good about what they have in that receiver room in terms of the number of targets. But Trey Wilson is going to be the guy, obviously, that's going to be the main big play thread. And that's been a big emphasis of camp is generating more big plays because they were near the bottom of the SEC last year. Passing plays of 30 yards or more. I think they were 13th in the league ahead of only Mississippi State. So that's an area where they really want to improve.
Yeah, they should be able to have success throwing the football. They've certainly got enough weapons. I guess the big question going into this game still is the status of Montrell Johnson. They mentioned Billy Napier mentioned, I guess, a couple weeks ago he'd be week to week following surgery. Leading rusher on the team from a year ago. You guys end up losing, one of your best running backs to rival Georgia. So, how does that running back room look right now, and how worried are you for the Gators in terms of being able to run the football if Johnson's not 100% against the Hurricanes?
Well, first of all, Billy Napier just last night he gave a pretty encouraging report on Montrell's progress that he's going to possibly return in modified form to practice this week. So I think they feel pretty good about his progress heading into the Miami game. What that means, or if there's a little subterfuge going on there, I mean, who knows? But I have a feeling that we're going to see Montrell in the Miami game. I just don't think that they will necessarily ride him, for many carries. I think it'd be like maybe he'd be on a pitch count, like 10 carries and so forth, because they do feel really good about that room. Particularly the two freshman backs, Jaden Ball, who had a really good spring game, and Katie Daniels has run the ball pretty well in the fall scrimmages as well. And then you have Trayon Webb coming back, who will kind of be Johnson's backup, a guy that had some experience last year as a true freshman. He comes into a sophomore year, and he's a guy that, Napier trusts in terms of doing the things that are involved as far as, not running the ball, picking up protections on blitzes. That's how Trevor Etienne got in Billy Napier's doghouse a little bit last year, was that he didn't pick up blitzes very well. And of course, was splitting carries with Montrell Johnson and decided to go to, Georgia, where it'll be interesting. I've heard some stories at Georgia where they're going to be very creative in how they use him in terms of, splitting him out, some at receiver and doing some different things with him up there. But for Florida's sake, I think they feel pretty good about the running back room. Jacoby Jackson, another guy, JUCO transfer from Pensacola Catholic High School, has had a good camp too. So they're really pleased about the running back room. I think they feel like they've recovered pretty well from the ETN transfer, where they have some depth there.
All right. Well, what about the offensive line? Because I think that's ultimately where this game will be won and lost for the Florida Gators. Miami's feeling pretty good about what they got on the defensive line. They obviously got Ruben Bain. They got, seven guys, I think, with double-digit career starts. went heavy in the transfer portal, spent a lot of money there to upgrade their depth and I know Florida went out. They got three starters back on that offensive line, but they also went out and picked up a couple portal additions. Curious how it's shaping up in your opinion.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the big question mark. And I heard they struggled early in camp, but they're starting to come around. Austin Barber is going to be a big key to this game, the left tackle, who, had some shoulder issues last year. He only played 8 to 12 games, but 2 years ago was a redshirt freshman and earned freshman All-American status. So he's a guy that has some ability. I think it's just going to be a matter of how healthy he is at the left tackle. And that matchup with Bain is going to be a fascinating matchup in my mind and could really determine the game. That being said, Jake Slaughter, they feel pretty good about at center. He started 8 games last year. After Kingsley Agakin had kind of an injury-filled and disappointing year. So Nigel Harris, a kid from Port St. Lucie, will be on the left side with Barber at left guard. Really the right side of the line, Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon is the guy that Brandon, excuse me, I always mess up that name. But he's the guy, transfer from San Diego State. Looks like he's going to be the right tackle, and they moved Damian George inside to right guard. Rod Curdy, another guy, a former Under Armour All-American from Jacksonville, has had a good camp. He could figure in some at right guard and backup center. So I think those are the 6 that you're going to see, the main guys on the offensive line. And then, some depth, certainly, King Jones has been a little banged up, but Bryce Lovett is a guy that can play tackle and guard. And I think you'll see hit some of him at Kid Melbourne. But I think overall, the pass protection is going to be a huge key in that game. And Graham Mertz is not the most elusive guy either. So you've really got to keep a clean pocket for him. He was sacked 33 times last year. And is a guy that has a lot of toughness in getting up from sacks, but certainly you want to eliminate those negative plays as much as possible.
Florida, defensively, I think that's where obviously some of their bigger issues were last season, right? We can agree on that. How is
Yeah.
that? How has that side of the ball changed at all? I know they picked up Joey Slackman out of the Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year out of Penn. Curious how he's sort of settling in there, and what do you think of the front seven that they're putting together?
Yeah, I think the biggest addition, he had a good spring, and I've heard he's had a good fall camp as well as Grayson Howard, the linebacker
Hmm.
transfer from South Carolina. I think he's going to be starting with Shamar James,
Okay.
and is a very good tackler. Slackman on the defensive line, he's been a little banged up recently, but he's a guy he's kind of a character. People really gravitate towards him and like him, and I think he'll be in the defensive tackle rotation along with Cam Jackson and Caleb Banks, who are coming back. Des Watson, another guy who certainly is mammoth at 430, 440 pounds. And has shown a little bit of playmaking ability here and there. I think with him, it's just the consistency and the number of snaps he can last is the question there. But they feel decent about the tackle rotation, and then we'll see about the edge rusher. I mean, Tyreek Sapp had a kid from Fort Lauderdale who Jason Taylor obviously coached. He had a pick 6 in a recent scrimmage. He's had a pretty good camp, along with Justice Boone, and then TJ Searcy and Kelby Collins are a couple of guys that young guys on the edge. Cameron James, that I think that they're hoping will take a step forward as well. So it'll be interesting. And then obviously the back end, Jason Marshall Jr., kid from Miami Palmetto, is the veteran back there, and Devin Moore. And we discussed a little bit about with the Cormani McClain situation where he probably won't be a factor back there. They brought in a safety from Wisconsin, Asa Turner, who's a hard hitter, who they really like. And Jordan Castell has had a good camp too, 2 interceptions and two preseason scrimmages. Sophomore who started 11 games as a true freshman last year, who they're very high on as well.
Seems like, everybody's just riding the Gators off this year, right? The 4.5 over under for
Yeah.
wins. They're looking at the schedule. They say, oh, there's a murderer's row, 5 straight tough games there to end the season. What's the feeling like just around the players and the locker room? What is your sense of their confidence going into this year?
Well, Graham Mertz kind of coined the phrase in the spring, and everyone is using it, is like prove each other right. We want to prove that we can get Florida back, and 14 starters coming back, 41,000 snaps. And, one of the things I'm going to write about is like is a year older, a year better. That's the big question. And I think this will be a year that will test Billy Napier and his coaching staff. We'll see how they can develop players because they've had a ton of players in their system now, guys that have been there for 3 years. Are they going to play better? Are they going to be crisper? Are they going to, tackle better? That was a huge issue last year, the physicality. And now they feel like, with Tyler Miles, the new strength coach, and what he's done, there's a feeling of, hey, look, this is a more physically mature team this year, maybe less reliant on true freshmen playing in key spots. That could play a little better in the SEC. So I think they're coming into the season, a little more confident than what the pundits think. And I don't think they're going to necessarily run the table. But 7-8 wins wouldn't be out of the question. Last year, a lot of people said they could have won 7 games, but they forget to say that, they were life and death against South Carolina as well. They could have ended up with only 4 wins if they didn't have a bunch of fourth down conversions in that game. So I think last year's team probably didn't have as much margin for error. I think this year's team probably does a little bit more, and I think it will result in, even with a difficult schedule, I think it will result in some progress and maybe a return to the bowl game. And then you hope that the following year with DJ Lagway taking the reins of the offense and the team being even more experienced and, fingers crossed, no major defections in the transfer portal, that you can build off that.
Yeah, Miami's a 2-point favorite right now. I'm not asking you for your pick because I know you're probably waiting until next week to make that stuff official. But what does your gut tell you right now? I mean, do you think that it's going to be a 2-point game and we're gonna be on the edge of our seat there in the swamp?
I think it's going to be a 4-point game. I think the swamp is going to play a factor in this game because it's early in the season. Fans are going to be riled up. I think Cam Ward being exposed to that will, I have seen quarterbacks that have been rattled a little bit. We saw Joe Milton last year with Tennessee. It affected him in an early season game at the Swamp. Cam Rising, threw an interception in a big spot 2 years ago at the Swamp when he was trying to rally his team for a go-ahead score. So I've seen good, talented quarterbacks have issues here when the crowd really gets into it. So I think that will play a factor. I think that's probably the best thing Florida has going for it, in this game, Miami. The fact that it's a season opener, it's at home, the crowd is going to be, really riled up for this game. And I think that I think home field will definitely play a factor in this game in Florida's favor. But I expect it to be a tight game, 4 points either way. But I think Florida, might be able to find a way to pull it out. And I think Florida at full health right now has a pretty good 2 deep. I mean, I think the big question becomes in November, not just with the brutal schedule in November, but the fact that, if you have a banged up team going into November, like Florida did last year when they lost, Shamar James, who's arguably one of their best defensive players, that's when you're really in trouble, when you don't have the depth. And this year they have a little more depth, but I don't know if they have enough to kind of, handle the second half of that schedule if the injuries come.
All right, Kevin, we're going to be on the edge of our seat, I think, sweaty and excited to be watching college football again very, very soon. Thank you for coming on, man. I want our listeners to be able to reach you on Twitter or follow you on Twitter. Where can they go?
Yeah, they can go at Kevin Brockway G1, or you can follow my work on Gatorsports.com or Gainesville.com. And Manny is always greatly appreciated, and it'll be a lot of fun up here in Gainesville. It should be quite an atmosphere.
Yeah, looking forward to returning the favor, by the way, when I go on your show soon. So we'll be talking more Canes Gators soon enough.
All right, thank you, Manny.